Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday. Let's talk about the Library of Alexandria and why it should have had a backup. I promise this actually does tie in with current events, so just bear with me. The Library of Alexandria had several unfortunate encounters with fire, and only the gods know how much was lost when it was finally destroyed for good. And while we can never be certain of the details, I think we're on solid ground to presume that we lost historical records, philosophical treatises, perhaps even ancient medical information, stories, poetry, songs, probably works of art, mythologies that have long since passed from human memory, and goodness knows what else that we might have found informative and useful today. Knowledge can be lost within the span of one generation, and it's scary to contemplate that. And a sufficiently destructive event, be that a natural disaster or through malice or even through neglect and ignorance, it doesn't take much for our entire species to be reduced to a very primitive state of being when information is lost. Nor does modern technology safeguard us from such a disaster. Techno companies alter and delete content and people all the time. Another danger lies in the vulnerability of this system. Destroy the servers and it's all gone. Limit the access, or if there's a sustained loss of electricity for any reason, or God forbid an EMP, and poof, gone. Not getting it back. So let's not fall prey to the delusion that it can't happen to us, as if we somehow, of all the generations of human beings, are somehow special and insulated from such a disaster and a loss of knowledge, or that even something even more disastrous, such as the Dark Ages 2.0, that simply couldn't occur. Let's abandon babyland and naivete and think seriously, particularly when we are contemplating writings and videos of a spiritual and religious nature. Paganism has already had to suffer the blows from the early Christian church suppressing knowledge, wiping it out, repurposing it, twisting things. Let's not take the chance with what we've been able to build in modern times, especially when we consider there's a great deal of instability in the world right now and within individual countries. So we are seeing a lot of very sensible people doubling their efforts to improve their lot as best they can, and they're doing what's within their power to become more self-sufficient in every possible way. Much can be done to help sustain life through hard times, and we've got a rough patch to get through uh, if I am not mistaken. However, in addition to dealing with the necessary practical concerns and taking what precautions we are able to take, let's not forget to preserve our religions. We've had the benefits of the internet and the convenience of being able to just Google things. We don't have to know it, we don't have to learn it, we don't have to remember it, we can just Google it. But suppose, just for whatever reason, we no longer had that tool at our disposal. Do we have enough wherewithal, enough resources, enough books on our shelves, enough informations in our heads to be able to continue with our cherished practices and then in due course teach them to others? What is the state of our knowledge without being able to double check with others of where we found the information to begin with, or with other practitioners with whom we only have contact through internet sources? But this is especially true for those of us who practice the craft. Are we sufficiently well versed that we would be able to function and practice with the knowledge we already possess? Or are we overly reliant on the internet and being able to use that as part of our research? Have we really learned our craft, or have we not? Another thing to consider is, how well do we know our myths and legends? How well do we know our surviving folklore? Do we have physical copies of these stories? And if we lost those, do we know enough of them to pass on those stories and the beliefs, the practices, the traditions? Can we as individuals do our part to keep the flame alive if push comes to shove? Now, the harder times get, the more people are going to be prone to turning to spirituality and religion to help them cope. It's true that there will be others who will lose their faith or have crisis of faith. Some may even become atheists. But if we look at the historical trend of times past, we will see that when everything is just falling to pieces, people do end up trying to reach out to the divine, whether it's the Christian church or pagan gods or some other idea. People are reaching out because they are seeking hope. Whether that hope is supposed to be manifested in this life, the afterlife, or the next life. They are just looking for something that is better than the nightmare that they are surrounded by. So, in hopes of meeting the demands of the present and laying the foundation for the future, I'm proposing that the pagan community thinks more long term and resists the urge to keep putting all of our eggs in one basket. We shouldn't be too reliant on the internet. We shouldn't be too reliant on our books. We shouldn't be too reliant on oral tradition, especially the Druidic practitioners. I mean, how much easier would your lives have been if the Druids had actually freaking written things down? So, I'm not suggesting that we abandon any of these things altogether, and I'm not suggesting that we abandon the internet by any means, especially when it comes to sharing and preserving pagan lore, both ancient and modern. But let's be smart about this. The tech companies have acknowledged biases, so let's not just use the mainstream companies. Create presences on new tech platforms. I myself am also available on BitChute and on Rumble. I have a certain archive of things I've begun on Gab. Just make use of these things. Create little pockets of paganism that our brothers and sisters might be able to stumble on, that they at least have access to, in the event that established platforms become unfriendly to us. Let's not imagine that the unfriendly attitude we see towards certain people in the political sphere, that isn't going to eventually encapsulate greater numbers of people, whether or not their politics align with the tech companies. Once censorship gets started, it tends to have a snowball effect. So let's not think that we are out of its line of fire. And also, let's make sure we do have our physical copies. So, books, magazines, article printouts, our personal grimoires, our book of shadows, diaries. And yes, doing all this, it does take up time, it takes up space, it requires effort, and it doesn't make us invulnerable to losses. Material items can be destroyed as easily as information on the web can be deleted. However, if it becomes a more common practice for people to have their own libraries, squirrel away copies of pagan books and other materials, and enough people do this, it reduces the odds of all information being lost. And last but not least, we can do what we can to create and sustain pagan communities and make sure that we are passing things down through oral traditions. And if we use all three of these techniques, it makes it much harder to stamp out modern paganism, even if we experience extreme hardships of whatever kind in the future. So the fate of the Library of Alexandria does not have to be our fate if we act with wisdom in the here and now. And I would love to have a broader conversation with this. If you'd like to, you can leave a comment telling me what you think down below in this channel, or you can come see me at Blackbird's Brew. There is a link to join in the description box below. And as always, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.